everyone. Welcome to video 4 of our Cooking and Cooling Alternative Support for Appendix A and B video series. This video is brought to you by AAMP's Outreach. I'm Abby Davidson, and I will be walking you through the requirements of Appendix A and B and alternate support for certain products. I'd like to extend a special thank you to Dr. Jonathan Campbell for his knowledge and expertise as we've compiled this presentation. As I walk you through the presentation, if you have any questions, please make sure you write them down, and you can contact myself at abby@aamp.com or Nelson Gatos, my outreach counterpart, at nelson@aamp.com. The reason behind this mini video series is to aid processors in identifying and helping identify alternate support for their processes if it's needed, other than the 2021 Appendix A and B. We'll walk through the requirements of Appendix A and B as it pertains to cured products specifically, and we'll also discuss alternate support options if the critical limits in Appendix A and B are not possible for your facility to obtain. So there are many hurdles that need addressed when processing cured products. With the 2021 update of Appendix A and B, there are concerns that processors may not be able to meet the critical limits outlined in this support. This includes meeting the Appendix A required come-up time window, meeting the relative humidity requirements, ensuring the appropriate time-temp combos are met, and that the products cool in an amount of time that yields favorable food safety results. Additionally, nitrite or nitrate levels in meat products may be a concern if you're not using a premixed cure salt, where product formulations may be at risk for adding too much sodium nitrite to product, though this practice is becoming less and less common as more people use the premixed pink cure salt. As we move forward through this presentation, when I reference Appendix A or Appendix B, please note that I am referencing the 2021 versions of each. If using Appendix A critical limits for cooking, product must reach these critical limits outlined here, which are the time-temp combinations, the come-up time criteria, as well as the relative humidity requirements. We'll also discuss the scientific gaps identified in Appendix A and B related to cured products later on in this presentation. All right, so the pathogens listed here are the major pathogens of concern as we cook meat products. Staphylococcus aureus is the pathogen of concern during come-up time and heating prior to lethality. Salmonella, no matter the species of product cooked, can be used as the indicator organism for lethality. This is because if Salmonella is destroyed via thermal destruction, most other pathogens should be as well. These are important biological hazards to keep in mind when you're building your hazard analysis and reassessing your HACCP plan. All right, we are now going to discuss the 3 critical parameters outlined in Appendix A. Of course, the following 3 critical limits are specific to cured products that are cooked to a full lethality temperature. For come-up time, these are the requirements that have to be met if using the critical parameters in Appendix A. The total time product temperatures between 50 degrees Fahrenheit and 130 degrees Fahrenheit is 6 hours or less. And note, this is internal product temperature for enhanced injected whole muscle or non-whole muscle meat. This is specific to products that meet a lethality temperature. FSIS will allow the use of scientific gaps for now, which again we'll talk about later, but then you can also utilize alternate support, including pathogen modeling predictions, which we will talk about towards the end of this presentation as well. All right, so we just talked about come-up time. Your critical parameter number 2 is ensuring that products meet a time and temp combination. So this slide shows the first part of the chart, that is in Appendix A. We recommend that processors utilize the 7-log lethality column at the far right to support their process. And just note that these are obviously in the Appendix A guideline if you would like to review them, or you can pause your screen now to review. This is the second part of the endpoint time and temp chart included in Appendix A. The time-temp combos listed above or listed here are specific to option 1 and 2 of the humidity requirements we'll discuss shortly. And this is only if the endpoint temperature is greater than 145 degrees Fahrenheit. So again, you can pause your screen now to review or take a look at the Appendix A guideline. All right, we just wanted to mention this as cured products can be large diameter a lot of the time as well. So this note is taken directly from the Appendix A compliance guideline. This is for any products larger than 10 pounds. So what we're saying here is if a processor never processes hams or any other product less than 10 pounds, and their oven temperature is maintained at 250 degrees Fahrenheit or higher, relative humidity does not need to be a critical parameter. We will talk about products with casing and how to address relative humidity on a later slide. All right, and as for humidity, this is critical parameter number 3. So in the chart displayed here, a facility has 4 options for humidity requirements to choose from. Note option 1 and 2 are specifically for products that reach a minimum of 145 degrees internal endpoint temperature. The flowchart here was developed to aid processors in identifying which option to use for relative humidity. It's a nice little walkthrough document. If you're working on identifying which option to use, go ahead and pause this slide or make sure to review this in the compliance guideline. This really does help figure out which relative humidity option to use. All right, and as I stated earlier, if you're using any type of casing, then relative humidity does not need to be monitored, as moisture is inherently maintained in the product. So make sure you document in the hazard analysis when you complete that due to the 2021 Appendix A, relative humidity is not a critical parameter for these products. And just a couple other notes about cooked product. This slide discusses some reminders for these. So your smokehouses are going to have to be mapped for cold spots. You certainly can reach out to us, your consultants, or your supplier of the smokehouse if you need help completing this. In general, mapping your smokehouse is important for different types of products, and especially important for small diameter products such as jerky, where the temperatures inside your oven can directly impact the product temperature. The information must be kept on site as part of your validation. The other note here is you want to make sure your probe placement is in a cold spot in your smokehouse for internal product temperature taking if a cold spot is present. Note, not all smokehouses have a cold spot. And finally, if you use temperature monitoring equipment with a calibration range, your CCP must be on the high side of that calibration range. So an example is if your CCP temperature is 158 degrees and the equipment you are monitoring the temperature with has a calibration range of plus or minus 2 degrees, your operational limit temperature needs to be at 160 degrees Fahrenheit. Moving on to alternate support and alternate options for Appendix A. So for the scientific study on this screen, this is a great article to support longer come-up times for cured bacon and cured hams. However, note this support does not address lethality. So processors will still have to use Appendix A time and temp combinations or utilize alternate support to support the process for lethality. My suggestion is to pause the screen here and identify if you would like to use these as your come-up time parameters for bacon and hams. Okay, the evaluation of Staphylococcus aureus growth potential in ham during a slow cooking process, the paper that's listed here. This is good support for Staphylococcus growth, but if you identify other pathogens as hazards in your process, additional support will be needed to prove these pathogens are not likely to occur. Additionally, lactate will need to be in the recipe for these products if this study is used, so just keep that in mind as well. But this is certainly a study you may be able to use as alternate support for bone-in hams. Okay, so that was Appendix A and lethality discussion. Now we're moving on to Appendix B and cooling. Processors are concerned that the cooling limits may be too stringent and that they may struggle with the critical limits that are outlined in Appendix B. And note that the 2021 Appendix B identifies critical limits for partially heat-treated and fully cooked product. The Clostridial species identified as hazards in meat and poultry products during cooling are both Clostridium perfringens and Clostridium botulinum. Vegetative cells are killed during lethality. However, Clostridium perfringens spores are not, and they can actually germinate, and then they can potentially grow into vegetative cells as well, and then grow during cooling. And they can grow to dangerous levels if not properly managed and controlled. Other pathogenic cells are destroyed during the heat treatment, leaving little competition for these Clostridial species during cooling. They can grow with limited or no oxygen present, as well as the danger zone temperatures, which can cause Clostridial growth to occur as well. Products should be processed to allow no growth of Clostridium botulinum and less than 1 log growth of Clostridium perfringens. All right, further, here's a list of product characteristics that can also affect cooling. These include product time and temp profile, pH, the percent brine concentration in the product, the type and concentration of phosphates, water activity, type and concentration of organic acid salts, and then ingoing sodium nitrite and erythrobate or ascorbate concentrations. The items in bold are the items most focused on with cured products. Okay, so for Table 1 in Appendix B, this is for products that are cooked to and reaching full lethality temperatures. Any of these options are available for products cooked to full lethality, but note that options 1.3 and options 1.4 are specific for products with sodium nitrite added or an equivalent replacement, which is, of course, natural cure. Table 2 is for products that are not cooked to full lethality. Again, either of these options will work. Just note that this is for products that have not met a full lethality temperature. If you'd like, go ahead and pause your screen now to review. Okay, so moving on, let's take a look at the scientific gaps. We'll talk through the scientific gaps that are specific to cured products. So for scientific gap number 2, make sure you look at the vulnerabilities in the far right column and identify if your process can meet these. They have to at least be addressed in your hazard analysis. So we certainly want to make sure that you're addressing the vulnerabilities on this slide within the scientific gap. This is specific for partially heat-treated smoked products that contain nitrite and erythrobate and ascorbate, and that have long come-up and cooling times. Scientific gap 3 will allow a processor to support a bacon process that does not meet the relative humidity requirements of Appendix A. If the bacon is formulated with at least 100 parts per million nitrate or nitrite, synthetic or natural, and at least 250 parts per million erythrobate or ascorbate, either synthetic or natural. So that's what scientific gap number 3 is saying. Again, note, take a look at the vulnerabilities, make sure that you can address those if needed. All right, scientific gap 4 is for products that are immersion or dry cured that contain nitrate and or nitrite and use an equilibration time instead of erythrobate or ascorbate, but cannot meet the options without nitrite in Table 1 or 2 of the compliance guideline. So to utilize scientific gap 4, again, just make sure you're meeting the requirements and doing what you can to reduce the vulnerabilities in the far right column. Okay, scientific gap 5 is for products that contain nitrite and use equilibration time instead of erythrobate or ascorbate, but do not have a brine concentration of 6% or greater. To utilize scientific gap 5, again, just make sure you're meeting the requirements and doing what you can to reduce vulnerabilities. Go ahead and pause now to review or take a look at these scientific gaps in Appendix B. Moving on, if a processor needs help with conducting pathogen modeling results, they can certainly reach out to AAMP staff. As shown in this slide, the models for Clostridium perfringens for cooked, uncured beef, pork, and chicken can be used from ARS's pathogen modeling program. And the models for Clostridium perfringens in cooked, cured beef and pork, as well as Clostridium perfringens and cooked beef supplemented with salt, sodium nitrite, and sodium pyrophosphate are validated through this pathogen modeling program as well as displayed on the screen. This screenshot is from Appendix B Compliance Guideline that identifies 4 different pathogen modeling options that a processor may use with modeling for Clostridium perfringens. If you need access to any of these, we certainly can point you in the right direction from the AAMP staff. All right, if you're using a pathogen model as support for your process, here are 5 things to keep in mind. 1, use a validated model. 2, use a minimum of 5 time and temperature data points for an accurate model. 3, conduct your modeling based on a worst case scenario. 4, input accurate information when asked, so pH, salt, etc. And then 5, of course, maintain results on file. My suggestion is having a processing authority document their acceptance of pathogen modeling information and keep that documentation on file just to further support the process. Moving on to alternate cooling options. The influence of sodium chloride content and cooling rate on outgrowth of Clostridium perfringens spores in cooked ham and beef, studied by Dr. Zyka, allows up to 21 hours cooling for hams. But note, this is only suitable for ham with greater than 2% salt concentration added to the formulation. The paper referenced on this slide is for another option to cool bacon. If using this study as support, product will need to be cooled from 120 degrees to 45 degrees within 15 hours. And then for extra antimicrobial control, applying liquid smoke or applying smoke during heat treatment is recommended. The support on this slide demonstrates that natural versions of sodium nitrite are effective at reducing Clostridium perfringens present on meat, but additional support will need to be provided if this document is going to be used. Additional support may be the addition of antimicrobial to the product formulation or reducing the cooling cycle even more. The scientific support here identifies that with the parameters listed on this slide, Clostridium perfringens can be controlled during cooling. This is specific to turkey products. Pause your screen now to review the critical limits to see if you can use these for your process. This Osterbauer study from 2017 is also a good support for longer cooling in hams. Again, go ahead and pause your screen now to review the cooling parameters and see if this will work for your facility. The pathogen modeling here is an example of alternate cooling that would still yield a safe cooked cured pork product, and this is using the ARS pathogen modeling program, just an example of the programs that you can use. If processors have issues with cooling their products, listed on this slide are good examples of ways to ensure that cooling product occurs in a quick way. Note that increasing airflow and leaving more space between products and between products and walls are the most impactful. Listed on this slide are other sources of cooling limits that are accepted. Go ahead and pause your screen now if you would like to review. And here are some tips when researching scientific studies. So you certainly want to use the appropriate scientific terms, utilize specific keywords, don't limit your search to just one engine, and make sure that you can meet all the parameters in the study you want to use. AMP staff is happy to take a look to identify if you need an extra set of eyes on a particular study. All right, and thank you for joining on this video of our Appendix A and B alternate video series. Go ahead and reach out if you have any questions, and stay tuned for the reassessment and validation presentation that will be the conclusion of this video series.